The Stowaway Experiment. In the vast expanse of space where stars glittered like spilled sugar across the infinite dark, the research vessel Axiom 9 drifted with precision and purpose. Captain Vexillian stood on the command deck, all six of his appendages positioned in formal observation stance as he surveyed his crew. The Vexillian ship was the pride of the Galactic Science Coalition, representing the pinnacle of xenobiological research technology in the known universe. Vexillian's four primary eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of satisfaction among his species. His secondary visual organs remained fixed on the holographic displays floating before him. 73 cycles of meticulous study, cataloging, and preservation of species from 47 planetary systems. 73 cycles without a single protocol breach or specimen contamination event. Status report. Vexillian's voice resonated through his speech glands, the sound waves vibrating at the precise frequency his crew had come to associate with authority. Science Officer Plex Moradin approached, her exoskeleton clicking softly against the polished floor. All specimens secure, Captain. Environmental parameters stable across all containment chambers. The new Earth specimens are particularly fascinating. Their cellular regeneration capabilities exceed our preliminary data by 12.3%. Excellent. And the security protocols? Triple redundant, as per Vexillian Scientific Mandate 5.5.9. Plex Moradin replied, her cranial ridges glowing faintly blue with pride. No unauthorized access to any specimen has occurred in the history of this vessel. The captain's mandibles clicked in approval. The Vexillians prided themselves on their methodical approach to the universe. Order, procedure, documentation, these were the pillars upon which their civilization had built its reputation as the foremost scientific authority in the galaxy. While other species stumbled through space exploration with chaotic enthusiasm, the Vexillians moved with deliberate precision. Begin preparation for hypersleep cycle, Vexillian commanded. We will reach the Andromeda outpost in approximately 17 rotations. The crew moved with synchronized efficiency, each member attending to their designated tasks without unnecessary communication. This was the Vexillian way, elegant in its silence, perfect in its execution. None of them noticed the small, blinking anomaly on the secondary cargo bay sensors. None of them registered the slight power fluctuation in Habitat Sector 12. And certainly none of them heard the soft, distinctly non-Vexillian giggle that echoed briefly through the ventilation system before disappearing into the hum of the ship's engines. Deep within the lower decks of the Axiom 9, past the meticulously labeled specimen chambers and beyond the careful organization of the secondary storage facilities, something moved, something that was decidedly not logged in any of the ship's extensive databases, something small, bipedal, and currently smearing an unknown sticky substance across a panel of highly sensitive equipment. 3-year-old Emma Watson, no relation to the famous actress, as her parents often clarified, was having the time of her short life. Dressed in overalls with a cartoon rocket ship emblazoned on the front, she toddled through the alien corridor with the fearless curiosity that only a human child could possess. In one hand, she clutched a partially eaten nutrition pack she discovered in what appeared to be a food preparation chamber. In the other, she dragged a stuffed elephant named Mr. Trunk, now adorned with various bits of alien technology she'd found interesting enough to attach to him. Shiny, she declared to no one in particular, reaching for a pulsing blue crystal embedded in the wall. The crystal, a critical component of the ship's secondary navigation system, responded to her touch by changing from blue to an alarmed purple. Emma found this delightful and poked it repeatedly, sending cascading error messages through the ship's systems that were immediately categorized as routine fluctuations by the overly confident artificial intelligence. Emma had been aboard the Axiom 9 for approximately 6 hours, though time meant little to her developing mind. Her presence there was the result of a series of increasingly improbable events that began with her mother, Dr. Stephanie Watson, bringing her daughter to the supposedly secure human research outpost on Europa, where she studied extraterrestrial microorganisms. What was meant to be a brief visit during a childcare emergency had coincided with the Vexillian ship's specimen collection expedition. In the controlled chaos of cataloging ice core samples, no one had noticed the small human who had wandered into an open supply container, curled up with her stuffed elephant, and fallen asleep among the thermal blankets. Now, having woken up in an environment unlike anything in her limited experience, Emma was doing what human children do best: exploring, touching, tasting, and generally wreaking havoc on systems designed by beings who had never encountered the unique destructive capabilities of a human toddler. "Mr. Trunk wants juice," Emma informed a sensor array, which scanned her repeatedly and failed to match her biosignature with any known species in its database. The computer, following its programming to the letter, created a new category for her: unidentified bipedal organism, possibly sentient, threat level, minimal. This was perhaps the single greatest miscalculation in Vexillian scientific history. On the command deck, First Security Officer Kraz Desmar's sensory appendages twitched uneasily. Something was wrong, though he couldn't quite identify what. His species' natural intuition, a trait generally dismissed as unscientific by Vexillian standards, was signaling alarm. "Captain," he ventured, interrupting the pre-hypersleep briefing with an unprecedented breach of protocol, "I am detecting irregularities." Captain Vexillian's four primary eyes narrowed in disapproval. "Specificity, Officer Kraz Desmar. Irregularities is not a scientific designation." "Apologies, Captain. The environmental sensors in lower deck 12 show atmospheric composition changes consistent with respiration patterns outside our established specimen parameters. Additionally, there have been 37 minor power fluctuations in non-critical systems over the past cycle." The captain's exoskeleton stiffened slightly, the Vexillian equivalent of a raised eyebrow. "Diagnostic results?" "All diagnostics. Report systems functioning within acceptable parameters," Kraz Desmar admitted, his voice membranes vibrating with uncertainty. "However, the pattern of anomalies suggests..." "Suggests what, officer?" Plex Moradin interjected, her tone conveying the cultural disdain Vexillians held for unsupported hypotheses. "It suggests the presence of an unlogged entity aboard the vessel," Kraz Desmar finished, bracing for the inevitable ridicule. The command deck fell silent. In Vexillian culture, suggesting a breach in their perfect systems was akin to questioning the fundamental laws of physics, theoretically possible but practically absurd. That would require 16 separate containment protocols to have failed simultaneously, the captain stated flatly. The statistical probability approaches 0. "Nevertheless," Kraz Desmar persisted, "I request permission to conduct a manual inspection of the affected sectors." Captain Vexillian's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or annoyance. The distinction was subtle, even among Vexillians. "Very well, officer. You may investigate these irregularities. Document your findings according to Scientific Mandate 3.21. "Thank you, Captain," Kraz Desmar replied, bowing his upper body in the formal gesture of acknowledgement. As he departed the command deck, Kraz Desmar failed to notice the small alert that briefly flashed on the environmental control panel. "Unexplained moisture detected, Deck 14, Section C." Had he seen it, he might have recognized it for what it was: the first documented evidence of human tears in Vexillian space. Emma had discovered that Mr. Trunk's left ear had torn during her adventures and was experiencing her first moment of homesickness. Emma's sadness was short-lived, as is often the case with toddlers. Her attention quickly shifted from Mr. Trunk's injury to the fascinating array of lights that lined the corridor ahead of her. The Vexillian ship, designed for beings who perceived a broader spectrum of light than humans, was illuminated in ways that created an enchanting wonderland for the young human. "Pretty colors," she whispered, reaching toward a panel that cycled through shades of ultraviolet, invisible to her human eyes but creating interesting patterns in the visible spectrum where they overlapped with the ship's standard lighting. The panel, detecting interaction, activated its user interface. To the Vexillians, this would have displayed a complex array of data and control options. To Emma, it was simply more colors to play with. Her small fingers tapped randomly across the surface, unknowingly adjusting environmental settings throughout an entire deck of the vessel. In specimen habitat 17, a collection of photosensitive flora from the methane swamps of Rigel 6 suddenly found themselves experiencing what their biochemistry interpreted as the rapid onset of mating season. They responded by releasing spores that turned the air in their chamber a festive pink and smelled vaguely of butterscotch. In habitat 23, the careful gravity calibration for a family of Jovian gas swimmers shifted by 0.02%, causing them to drift slightly to the left and bump repeatedly into the invisible barrier of their enclosure. They found this confusing but not unpleasant, and began a series of movements that resembled an elaborate waltz. Through it all, Emma continued her exploration, leaving a trail of minor chaos in her wake. She found a storage compartment filled with what appeared to be silver packets. These were emergency ration supplements for the Vexillian crew, formulated to provide essential nutrients for their unique physiology. To Emma, they looked remarkably like the juice pouches her mother sometimes packed for her. After several failed attempts to locate a straw, she bit directly into one of the packets. The resulting flavor was not entirely unpleasant, something like blueberries mixed with celery and a hint of cinnamon. Emma decided this was acceptable and continued on her journey. The silver packet clutched in one hand, occasionally taking sips as she wandered. What she didn't realize was that the Vexillian supplement, while not harmful to human physiology, had an unexpected side effect on her developing system. It heightened sensory perception and slightly accelerated thought processes. As the compound entered her bloodstream, Emma began to notice details she might otherwise have missed: the subtle patterns in the wall panels, the almost musical quality to the ship's background hum, and most importantly, the small maintenance access tunnel that appeared to be exactly the right size for a curious 3-year-old explorer. "Adventure time, Mr. Trunk," she declared solemnly to her stuffed companion, and crawled into the opening without hesitation. Security Officer Kraz Desmar was becoming increasingly agitated as he methodically searched through Deck 12. His sensory appendages were now fully extended, quivering slightly as they sampled the air for any unusual particles or vibrations. So far, he had found nothing to substantiate his concerns, which made the persistent sensation of wrongness all the more frustrating. Vexillians were not prone to imagination. Their neural architecture favored logical progression and empirical observation over creative thought. This biological predisposition had served them well as they developed into the galaxy's premier scientific minds, but it left Kraz Desmar poorly equipped to deal with his current situation. He knew something was amiss, but without concrete evidence, he was beginning to question his own sensory input. Security Officer Personal Log, Supplemental. He spoke into his data recorder. Inspection of Deck 12 has revealed no abnormalities, consistent with unauthorized presence. Proceeding to Deck 13 per expanded search parameters. As he entered the lift that would take him to the next deck, Kraz Desmar noticed something unusual on the floor. A small, sticky smudge that didn't match any substance commonly found on the vessel. He knelt to examine it more closely, extracting a sampling device from his utility belt. The substance was primarily composed of organic compounds, specifically carbohydrates and fruit enzymes. It appeared to be partially digested. Most puzzling of all, it contained genetic material that matched no species currently cataloged in the ship's specimen database. For the first time in his career, Kraz Desmar experienced something approaching excitement. Computer, analyze sample. And compare with full xenobiological archives, not limited to current specimen inventory. The computer hummed softly as it processed the request. After a moment, it responded in the precise, measured tones preferred by Vexillian sensibilities. Sample contains organic material consistent with genus Homo, species sapiens, juvenile developmental stage. Substance appears to be partially processed nutrient material, commonly referred to as applesauce in human terminology. Kraz Desmar's exoskeleton stiffened in shock. Human? That's impossible. We haven't collected any human specimens on this expedition. Correct, the computer confirmed. No human specimens are logged in current inventory. The implication sent a wave of discomfort through Kraz Desmar's nervous system. If there was human genetic material aboard without a corresponding specimen log, that could only mean one thing. They had an unauthorized human on the vessel. The very concept violated so many protocols that Krasdesmar's mind initially refused to process it. Computer, initiate full biometric scan of all decks. Search for life signs matching human parameters. Scanning, the computer replied. Please, note that scanning efficiency is reduced by 22% due to unexpected power fluctuations in primary sensor array. Of course, Krasdesmar thought. The anomalies he had detected earlier. They weren't system malfunctions, they were the result of human interference. But what kind of human would be capable of boarding their vessel undetected and then causing such subtle disruptions? It would require incredible stealth capabilities, advanced technological knowledge, and a deep understanding of Vexillian systems. The computer interrupted his thoughts. Scan complete. Results inconclusive. Possible human. Biosignature detected in maintenance network between decks 13 and 14. But signal is weak and intermittent. Krasdesmar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of increased stress among his species. Specify nature of human biosignature. Biosignature indicates a human approximately 3 standard Earth years in age. Krasdesmar stared at the computer, terminal in disbelief. That's not possible. You're suggesting we have a human infant aboard? Correction, a human toddler. There is a distinction in developmental stages that... I am familiar with human developmental terminology, Krasdesmar interrupted, his patience waning. What I find incomprehensible is how such a creature could have boarded our vessel and evaded detection. The computer, not programmed to speculate, simply repeated, Biosignature indicates a human toddler. Krasdesmar stood frozen for 3.7 seconds, an eternity by Vexillian standards, as he contemplated the proper protocol for this unprecedented situation. There was, of course, no established procedure for dealing with unauthorized human toddlers aboard research vessels. The closest applicable protocol was Containment Directive 7.8.2. Procedures for managing escaped specimens of undetermined threat. Level. He tapped his communication device. Captain, this is Security Officer Krasdesmar. I believe we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Emma was having a marvelous time in the maintenance tunnels. The network of passages was illuminated by soft blue lighting that reminded her of the nightlight in her bedroom back home. The walls hummed pleasantly and occasional puffs of warm air came through vents in the floor, making her giggle as they ruffled her curly brown hair. Look, Mr. Trunk, she whispered to her stuffed elephant. Secret passage. The maintenance system was designed to accommodate the Vexillians' drone repair units, flat, disc-shaped robots approximately 30 centimeters in height. This made the tunnels perfectly sized for Emma's small form, allowing her to crawl comfortably on hands and knees while dragging Mr. Trunk alongside her. What Emma didn't realize was that her journey through the maintenance network was triggering a cascade of minor system disruptions throughout the ship. The tunnels were lined with touch-sensitive control panels that allowed maintenance drones to interface with various ship functions. These panels, detecting Emma's body heat and the pressure of her hands and knees, were registering her presence as multiple drones attempting to perform contradictory operations. In the medical bay, the automated dispensary suddenly began preparing treatments for ailments no one had reported. In the galley, food processors started producing meals that combined incompatible Vexillian dietary elements. In the specimen habitats, lighting cycles began to shift randomly, causing confusion among the carefully maintained biological samples. Emma, blissfully unaware of the havoc she was creating, continued her exploration until she reached a junction where the tunnel widened into a small chamber. Here, the maintenance network connected to the ship's primary environmental control system, a critical hub that regulated temperature, atmosphere composition, and gravity throughout the vessel. The chamber was filled with glowing crystals of various colors, each representing different environmental parameters. To the Vexillians, this was a precisely calibrated system of extraordinary complexity. To Emma, it looked like the inside of a kaleidoscope. Pretty, she declared, and promptly sat down in the middle of the chamber, reaching for the nearest crystal, a pulsing red one that happened to control the ship's gravitational stability. Her small fingers closed around the crystal. The ship's artificial intelligence detected the unauthorized interaction and attempted to compensate. Unfortunately, it had no programming to account for the unpredictable movements of a human toddler. The crystal, designed to respond to precise, deliberate adjustments, was suddenly being manipulated in ways its creators had never anticipated. Throughout the Axiom 9, gravity began to fluctuate in subtle but noticeable ways. Objects not secured to surfaces started to drift slightly before settling back down. Liquids in containers formed perfect spheres before flattening again. The Vexillian crew members, with their natural sensitivity to gravitational changes, felt waves of disorientation wash over them. On the command deck, Captain Zex Tillin had just received Kraz Desmar's disturbing report when the gravity fluctuations began. His exoskeleton stiffened in alarm as he felt the subtle shift in the ship's fundamental physical constants. "Emergency, Protocol Alpha," he announced, his voice resonating with authority despite the unprecedented nature of the situation. "All crew to stations. Science Officer Plex Moradin, explain these gravitational anomalies." Plex Moradin's appendages moved rapidly over her console, her 4 primary eyes blinking in sequence as she analyzed the incoming data. "Captain, the environmental control hub on Deck 14 is registering unusual activity. The gravitational matrix is being manipulated." "By what?" the captain demanded. "Unknown, sir. The pattern does not match any known form of interference or malfunction. It's almost as if—" She hesitated, her scientific training temporarily overwhelmed by the sheer impossibility of what she was seeing. "Continue, Science Officer," Captain Zex Tillin prompted, his patience visibly thinning. "It's almost as if someone is playing with the controls," she finished, her voice membranes vibrating with disbelief. The captain's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Vexillian equivalent of a human frown. "Security Officer Kraz Desmar reports the possible presence of a human juvenile aboard the vessel. Could this be connected?" Pleximoradin's exoskeleton paled slightly, a physiological response indicating extreme surprise. "A human juvenile?" "I am aware of how improbable it sounds," the captain interrupted. "Nevertheless, we must investigate all possibilities. Direct Security Officer Kraz Desmar to the Environmental Control Hub immediately." As Pleximoradin carried out his orders, Captain Zex Tillin turned his attention to the ship's main view screen, which now displayed a diagnostic overview of the vessel's systems. Throughout the schematic, small alerts were appearing and disappearing, like stars blinking in and out of existence. Each represented a minor system disruption, but together they formed a pattern that no Vexillian mind could have predicted. The perfect order of the Axiom 9, maintained through 73 cycles of meticulous scientific exploration, was unraveling, all because of a small human who had yet to master the art of tying her own shoes. Kraz Desmar moved with purpose through the corridors of Deck 14, his sensory appendages fully extended as he approached the environmental control hub. The gravitational fluctuations had subsided somewhat, but other systems throughout the ship continued to behave erratically. Most concerning were the reports from the specimen habitats. Several containment fields had experienced momentary lapses, though fortunately none of the specimens had escaped. As he neared the maintenance access point that would lead him to the control hub, Kraz Desmar reviewed what little information he had about human toddlers. His knowledge of Earth species was primarily focused on their biological characteristics, rather than their behavioral patterns. He knew humans were mammals, that their young developed relatively slowly compared to many galactic species, and that they were considered highly adaptable. Beyond that, he was entering unknown territory. He paused at the maintenance access point, extending a specialized appendage to open the panel. "Computer, confirm location of human biosignature." "Human biosignature currently located in Environmental Control Hub, Central Chamber," the computer responded. "Biosignature readings indicate the subject is consuming a nutrition supplement formulated for Vexillian physiology." Kraz Desmar's exoskeleton stiffened in alarm. Is it harmful to the human? Negative. Supplement composition is compatible with human digestive systems. However, certain compounds may produce mild psychoactive effects in human neurology, including enhanced sensory perception and temporary acceleration of cognitive processes. Wonderful, Krasdesmar thought. We have a human toddler with artificially enhanced senses loose in our most sensitive systems. This situation could not possibly be more problematic. As if to prove him wrong, the computer added, "Alert. Specimen Habitat 42 environmental controls have been reset. Atmospheric composition is now shifting to match Earth parameters." Habitat 42 contained a collection of Vexillian crystal formations, silicon-based quasi-sentient structures that required a methane-rich environment and would dissolve in Earth-like atmospheric conditions. They were among the rarest specimens aboard the Axiom 9. Initiate emergency preservation protocol for Habitat 42, Krasdesmar ordered as he prepared to enter the maintenance tunnel. And inform the captain that I am proceeding to intercept the human. With that, he entered the tunnel, his elongated body barely fitting through the opening designed for maintenance drones. He moved awkwardly but efficiently, following the trail of subtle disturbances left by Emma's passage, small handprints on touch-sensitive panels, discarded bits of the silver nutrition packet, and in one particularly concerning spot, what appeared to be a crude drawing made with some form of colored wax. The drawing depicted what Krasdesmar eventually recognized as a simplified Vexillian, though the proportions were wildly inaccurate, and it appeared to be smiling, a facial expression Vexillians were physically incapable of making. Next to it was a smaller figure that presumably represented the human child, holding what looked like a four-legged creature with an extended nasal appendage. Krasdesmar found the drawing simultaneously disturbing and fascinating. It suggested that the human child had observed Vexillian crew members, yet no one had reported seeing the intruder. More importantly, it demonstrated cognitive abilities he hadn't expected in such a young specimen, the capacity for representational art and abstract thinking. As he approached the central chamber of the environmental control hub, Krasdesmar could hear a sound that his translator implant identified as humming, a human vocalization often associated with contentment or concentration. The melody was simple and repetitive, occasionally interrupted by what sounded like one-sided conversation. "Mr. Trunk wants the blue one next," a high-pitched voice declared. "Blue is his favorite." Krasdesmar paused, considering his approach. His training had never covered how to apprehend a human toddler. Should he treat the creature as a potentially dangerous intruder? As an escaped specimen? As a sentient being with rights under Galactic Coalition law? The lack of clear protocol was deeply unsettling to his Vexillian sensibilities. Finally, he decided on the most direct approach. Advancing to the entrance of the central chamber, he positioned himself to block the exit and activated the universal translator in his communication device. "Attention, human juvenile," he announced, his voice modulated to what the ship's database suggested was a non-threatening tone for human offspring. "I am Security Officer Krasdesmar of the research vessel Axiom 9. Your presence aboard this vessel is unauthorized. Please identify yourself and explain your purpose." The humming stopped abruptly. In the center of the chamber, surrounded by glowing environmental control crystals in various states of recalibration, sat a small human female. She wore blue cloth coverings on her lower limbs and an upper garment decorated with a primitive spacecraft design. Her upper cranial area was covered with dark, curly filaments, and her facial features were arranged in what Krasdesmar recognized as an expression of surprise. In one hand, she held a blue crystal that controlled atmospheric composition in the ship's central sectors. In the other, she clutched a worn fabric representation of an earth mammal, presumably the Mr. Trunk she had been addressing. For several seconds, human and Vexillian stared at each other in mutual fascination. Then, to Krasdesmar's utter bewilderment, the small human's face reconfigured into what his training identified as a smile. "Hi, Bugman," she exclaimed cheerfully. "Want some juice?" She extended the partially consumed silver nutrition packet toward him, apparently offering to share. Krasdesmar, for the first time in his distinguished career as a Vexillian security officer, found himself completely at a loss for how to proceed. Captain Vexillian stood rigid in the central specimen laboratory, all 6 of his appendages positioned, in the formal stance of scientific assessment as he observed the human toddler. After Krasdesmar's awkward but successful retrieval of the small intruder, the captain had ordered the child brought to the laboratory for proper examination and containment. Emma sat on an examination table, swinging her legs back and forth and clutching Mr. Trunk tightly to her chest. She seemed entirely unperturbed by her surroundings or by the collection of alien beings now studying her with intense scientific curiosity. If anything, she appeared to be equally interested in them. "Is your skin crunchy?" she asked, pointing at the captain's exoskeleton. Captain Vexillian ignored the question, turning instead to Science Officer Pleximoridon. "Analysis?" Pleximoridon consulted her data pad, where the results of their initial scans were displayed. Subject is indeed a human female juvenile, approximately 3.2 Earth years in age. Vital signs are within normal parameters for the species, though there are elevated levels of serotonin and dopamine, likely from consumption of our nutritional supplements. No signs of distress or ill health. "And how?" the captain asked, his voice resonating with carefully controlled frustration. "Did this creature come to be aboard our vessel?" "Preliminary hypothesis suggests accidental inclusion with them, specimens collected from the Human Research Outpost on Europa," Pleximoridon replied. "The collection team reports that several storage containers were transferred directly to our cargo bay, without detailed inventory scanning, as they were labeled as non-biological research materials." "I was sleeping," Emma interjected, her pronunciation of sleeping slightly impaired. "In the blanket box with Mr. Trunk." She held up her stuffed elephant for emphasis. The captain's 4 primary eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep consternation among his species. "This represents an unprecedented breach of protocol. The implications for our research, for interspecies relations with Earth authorities—" "Cookie?" Emma interrupted, apparently unconcerned with the diplomatic crisis her presence represented. She pointed at a tray of nutrient discs designed for the Jovian gas swimmers. "Those are not for human consumption," Pleximoridon informed her. "They contain compounds that would be highly toxic to your system." Emma considered this information with a solemnity that seemed incongruous with her small size. "Mr. Trunk is hungry," she declared after a moment of thought. "The stuffed representation of an Earth pachyderm does not require nutrition," Krasdesmar pointed out, his voice carrying the slightly strained quality of someone trying very hard to be reasonable. "In an unreasonable situation, it is not a living organism." Emma fixed him with a look that, even across the vast gulf of species difference, clearly communicated her opinion of his intelligence. "He's pretend hungry," she explained, as if this clarified everything. Before any of the Vexillians could formulate a response to this perplexing statement, the laboratory doors slid open to admit Medical Officer Trasvalakir. The Vexillian physician carried a specialized scanner designed for detailed biological analysis. "I have prepared appropriate nutritional supplements for the human juvenile," Trasvalakir announced, placing a small container of what appeared to be colorful gelatinous cubes on the examination table beside Emma. "These should meet her dietary requirements while we determine the proper course of action." Emma eyed the cubes suspiciously. "What flavor?" The medical officer's sensory appendages twitched slightly, the Vexillian equivalent of confusion. "They contain the essential nutrients required by your species, including proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, vitamins, and minerals." "But what flavor?" Emma persisted. After a moment of what appeared to be internal struggle, Trasvalakir responded, "The closest human taste equivalent would be strawberry." This answer seemed to satisfy Emma, who cautiously picked up one of the cubes and took a small bite. Her expression brightened immediately. "Yummy. Mr. Trunk wants one too." As Emma carefully fed a gelatinous cube to her stuffed companion, Captain Zex Tillin turned to address his officers in the Vexillian high-frequency communication range, inaudible to human ears. "This situation is without precedent," he stated. "We have inadvertently removed a human juvenile from her home planet. The legal and ethical implications are severe. We should return to the Europa outpost immediately," Krasnodesmar suggested. "Return the human to her own kind." "That would delay our research mission by at least 12 cycles," Plex Morid countered. "The specimens in habitats 15 through 28 require transfer to the Andromeda facility within the next 8 cycles, or their viability will be compromised. Are you suggesting we prioritize our research specimens over the safe return of a sentient being to its family unit?" Krasnodesmar's sensory appendages vibrated with indignation. "I am merely stating the scientific reality," Plex Morid replied, coldly. "Perhaps we could place the human in stasis until our primary mission is complete." Medical Officer Trazvalakir's exoskeleton paled slightly, the Vexillian indication of alarm. Human juveniles respond poorly to stasis fields. Their neurological development could be permanently impaired. As the Vexillian officers debated, none of them noticed that Emma had finished feeding Mr. Trunk and was now watching them with surprising intensity. Despite their use of communication frequencies beyond human hearing range, she seemed to be following their conversation, her head tilting slightly, as if she were trying to understand. "I want my mommy," she announced suddenly, interrupting the Vexillian debate. Her lower lip trembled slightly and moisture began to gather in her eyes, a physiological response that the Vexillians recognized as a precursor to human distress vocalization. Captain Zexatilin's sensory appendages flattened against his exoskeleton, a sign of discomfort among his species. Human emotional displays were notoriously difficult for Vexillians to manage, their own young hatched fully independent, requiring only minimal instruction rather than the extensive nurturing human offspring seemed to need. "Your maternal guardian is not present," the captain stated, attempting to modulate his voice to what the ship's database suggested was a soothing tone for human juveniles. "However, we will endeavor to reunite you with your family unit as soon as circumstances permit." This clinical explanation did nothing to prevent the tears that now began to spill down Emma's cheeks. "Want mommy now?" she insisted, her voice rising in both volume and pitch. The Vexillian officers exchanged glances, their sensory appendages twitching in synchronized distress. None of their extensive scientific training had prepared them for dealing with an emotionally distraught human toddler. It was Security Officer Krasnodesmar who finally took action. Moving closer to the examination table, he extended one of his smaller manipulative appendages toward Emma in what he hoped was a non-threatening gesture. "Your distress is understandable," he said carefully. "Perhaps we could provide you with temporary accommodations that would minimize your discomfort until reunion with your maternal guardian is possible." Emma sniffled regarding the offered appendage with watery eyes. "Can Mr. Trunk come too?" "The inanimate representation of an Earth pachyderm may accompany you," Krasnodesmar confirmed solemnly. After a moment of consideration, Emma placed her small hand on Krasnodesmar's appendage. The Vexillian security officer went completely still, clearly unprepared for the direct physical contact. Among his species, casual touching was reserved for only the most intimate of family connections. "Your appendage is smooth," Emma observed, running her fingers along the polished exoskeleton. "Not crunchy." "Indeed," Krasnodesmar managed to respond, his voice strained. Captain Zexatilin, recognizing that the immediate crisis had been at least temporarily averted, made a quick decision. "Security Officer Krasnodesmar, you will be responsible for the human juvenile's care and containment until we determine the appropriate course of action. Science Officer Plex Morid, analyze the impact of a potential return to the Europa outpost on our specimen viability. Medical Officer Trazvalakir, prepare a comprehensive report on the human's health requirements." The captain's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep concern. "This situation represents the most significant protocol breach in the history of our research program. We must resolve it with the utmost attention to both scientific integrity and ethical responsibility. As the officers acknowledged their assignments, Emma looked up at Kraz.